and looking at China now transitioning its economy from a more investment-driven to a more consumption-driven economy, I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, let's just pick up on that a second. I want to go to Anil on this point because you're absolutely right. They are trying to shift their economy from being export-led to be more service-based. They are making progress on this front, and their GDP is rising. It's going to go from 12 to 18%. You said. Over a certain period of time. Export growth is slowing. That means there's more domestic demand. Will that mean that shipping's role in all that will come more from intra-Asia trade? And what will this mean for the Europeans?
Yeah. I think, as the Chinese economy moves to more consumption-driven, but at the same time, it will be a less energy-intensive economy. And so what that means is that the imports of commodities, things like iron ore, things like coal, but not things like oil, that the import of commodities other than oil will grow slower, at a slower pace in China than GDP growth. Also on the export side, that as the economy moves towards domestic consumption, towards more services, obviously goods export, which is what shipping is about, is likely to grow at a slower pace than the GDP.
So for the dry bulk sector, more tears ahead, basically. Yes, okay. Espen, I know you wanted to pick up on the point Hans was making about energy policy in Europe vis-a-vis Russia. Thoughts on that? Where are we going with that?
Can I just first say that until a few years ago, the majority of the countries in the world thought that they could all be export-driven, but that doesn't add up because if everybody exports, nobody's importing. Exactly. So you kind of have to have a balance, and it's a very important thing to follow. Is exactly how successful India and China and these other growth economies are to really shift to a more sort of internal balance. But I definitely think that is correct, that if the conflict with Russia continues for much longer, it will start having lasting effects that may outlive even the crisis in Ukraine itself. Because if it is solved tomorrow, maybe not. If it takes years, investments patterns will change, energy flows will change, and people will start adapting to a much colder relationship to Russia, and that's significant also for the energy field.
Well, let me just pick up on that because you talked about strategic competition, these blocks forming, be it Russia and China or the US and Europe with the sanctions against Russia. How is this all likely to play out? How should the shipping community be thinking about this? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Russia might want to form some kind of bloc with China, but I'm not convinced that China wants to be part of a bloc with Russia. That's not a two-way street. I think China has a more global ambition and does recognize that China's success only came after embracing the basic principles of international trade and money flows. They're not going to trade that away. It's more like a classical state growing, as we've seen many times in history, who kind of feels that the space for them isn't really big enough, and they try to enlarge that space without necessarily wanting to challenge people, but people around feel challenged because the old patterns are gone, and hence the question is, how peaceful will that transformation be for the rest of us?